Thank you.
All right, let's get started. We have a full house today, which is good to see on a rainy day. Everyone here and on time. Good to see it. Let's turn things over to Jason to take the legal steps we need to formally open our meetings.
Good morning, everyone. I know that Elaine McKeon and Ida Brewer are participating in the meeting via video conference from the New York State Division of Budget Conference Center at the Capitol Building, Room 131 in Albany. And Marge Rogatz is attending via video conference from the office of Expedia at 325 Duffy Avenue, Hicksville, New York. Good morning, Elaine and Ida. Can you see and hear us?
Good morning. Yes, we can.
Great. And I will now ask for motions and seconds to call to order the May 8, 2014 New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, and the State of New York Mortgage Agency. May I have a motion for Hfa and AHC?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
May I have a motion and a second for SONYMA?
So moved. Second.
As items are presented to each board throughout today's meetings, these motions and seconds will be used unless specific items call for a different vote or unless any board member or director wishes to record his or her vote differently.
We'll now turn things over to Darrell for the President's report. Darrell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Missed you last month. Of course, we were participating in a conference with HUD. Since that time, we've also served on a panel with RPA, and it was great to look out in the audience and know that not only did I have staff backup, but I also had board backup. As in attendance was Nestor Joyce, so I appreciate that support. It's an exciting time to be building affordable housing in New York State, whether it's New York City's ambitious plan to create or preserve 200,000 affordable units over the next 10 years, something you'll hear more about shortly. Financing projects here at our agency are working on housing issues like GSE reform in Washington. Housing is front and center. As I've outlined before, we continue to move Governor Cuomo's significant affordable housing goals into 2014 and beyond. In light of the city's plan, I think it's important to highlight these priorities once again as House New York continues into the second year. This 5-year plan endeavors to create 14,300 affordable units across New York State. And in 2014, Governor Cuomo has added significant new capital resources to reinforce the plan's goal. The governor is seeking to use federal monies to leverage those already established to create and preserve an additional 3,000 affordable housing units in multifamily developments. With that said, here at the agency earlier this morning, the Mortgage Insurance Committee approved insurance for 7 projects representing 613 units of affordable housing in New York County, Kings, and Bronx. And today at the Affordable Housing Corporation, you'll be asked to approve over $8 million in funding of 508 units in 24 counties outside New York City. These counties include Erie, Tompkins, Oneida, Livingston, Seneca, and Wayne. And I'm especially excited about these grants as they include monies to be invested in projects in counties we don't often have an opportunity to do business in. On the multifamily side today at HFA, we will be seeking your approval for 4 projects, including 2 80/20s, one of which, Navy Pier Court, is the first 80/20 located in Staten Island. Other projects include Campbell Gardens, a 293-unit MRT project located in Brooklyn, and the Cove on the Concourse, a 50-unit all-affordable project of mixed income residents in the Bronx. Over the last 2 weeks, staff has met with both houses of the state legislature to review and answer questions with regard to our pending bills. Marion has presented our proposed HFA pipeline and explained the new financing model for our 80/20s. And we expect that by close of session, all of our business would have been handled. Staff is also currently preparing for next week's NYSAFA conference, and HCR will be well represented at the conference during panel discussions. We are also finalizing the details of our board tour next week. Staff made sure that it rained today so that we'll have a sunny Tuesday. Expectations are that the weather will be in the mid-70s, so we look forward to a great opportunity to take a 3D look at some of the business that we've done, just to reinforce how important it is and to energize us for the work that comes. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. Any questions or comments for Daryl's report? Seems like there's a lot going on, not only with us, but the city, which is good to see. And we were going to have Joe Palazzo. Where are you, Joe? Joe's our VP for Intergovernmental Relations, who's going to give us a little update on the New York City plan that was just announced earlier this week by Mayor de Blasio. So, Joe, bring us up to speed.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I've been asked to just give a quick overview of New York City's housing plan announced on Monday. The plan is titled Housing New York, a 5-borough 10-year plan. We've provided a copy of the executive summary, and I have several copies of the full 116-page report available if you'd like it, or we can email you a PDF. I just ask if you have any questions that you sort of hold them to the end so staff can help me out. This morning I would just like to highlight some of the key points of the plan and let you know that HCR staff is currently reviewing it in depth. Commissioner Towns has directed Sharon Devine, working with Marion, the other presidents, COO Kevin Kelly, to identify how the plan impacts all the state's housing resources. We are specifically looking for places where New York State can partner with the city to maximize resources in areas or instances in the plan where a state-controlled resource or program is indicated, such as tax-exempt bond cap, rent regulation, 421A, or J51 tax abatements. And lastly, we're in search of places where New York City's plan can complement Governor Cuomo's ongoing Housing New York program begun in 2013. I'd like to start with some facts. The program is unprecedented in scale. According to the city, it is the largest affordable housing plan ever attempted in the United States. It calls for 200,000 affordable units over 10 years, 120,000 units to be preserved, and 80,000 units to be newly built. Just as a reference, 200,000 units would house approximately 500,000 people, more than the population of the cities of Miami or Atlanta. New York City estimates the total cost, including all possible public and private sources, will be $41.4 billion. The construction and preservation of 200,000 units of housing is projected to create 194,000 construction jobs and nearly 7,100 permanent jobs. The plan begins with the premise that the shortage of affordable housing in New York City has reached a crisis point. It then gives some reasons why, such as wage stagnation, the mismatch of housing supply and demand created by more people moving to or staying in the city rather than leaving, older residents aging in place, and young families remaining rather than moving to the suburbs. It then enumerates 8 guiding principles, including how the city's planning process and land use policies should be revamped, and the need to protect older housing development projects and to lock them into affordability. It also discusses the want to protect tenants and rent-regulated units more aggressively and thereby keeping those units affordable. The document then outlines key policies and programs for implementation of the plan. Some key policies include the development of development in all 5 boroughs, the implementation of a mandatory inclusionary housing program, and the harnessing of affordable housing investments to generate quality jobs. In preserving the affordability of existing housing stock, the plan calls for the protection of tenants and stemming the tide of rent deregulation by preventing abuses of the vacancy and luxury decontrol provisions and capital improvement rules. In the building of new affordable housing, the plan calls for the introduction of a pilot mixed income program at 50-30-20, which expands the traditional 80-20 model to target 20% of the project's units to low-income households, 30% of the units for moderate-income households, and 50% of the units for middle-income households. These income bands are fleshed out in the full report. The plan also calls for 2 new programs to develop small vacant sites, which will focus on developing smaller projects with smaller developers, with a particular interest in local not-for-profits and CDCs. Other programs include the development of affordable housing on underused public and private sites, the reform of zoning, building, and housing codes and other regulations to lower the cost and unlock development opportunities, and to engage NYCHA residents in a conversation to preserve NYCHA housing units and assess the potential for underused NYCHA land and develop rights to benefit existing residents and serve other shared goals. Sound a little familiar? And finally, the funding. The mayor's 2015 budget will propose more than to double the budget of the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and develop and its capital budget in the 5-year plan. The mayor's budget will also propose additional funding for infrastructure investments needed to make land available for significant new housing opportunities. Through a series of new loan securitizations immediately and over the course of the plan, the city will maximize the resources available to HDC to contribute to the plan. The mayor's 2015 operating budget will also increase staffing at the Department of City Planning and at HPD to ensure that the plan can be efficiently and quickly implemented. Working with financial institutions, pension funds, financial intermediaries, and philanthropy, the city will seek to leverage private capital on a greater than 3-to-1 basis. The city will also seek to work in partnership with the state and federal governments to identify new resources to fund affordable housing in the city. The plan will also lay out a comprehensive state and federal legislative agenda for needed reforms and authority. And in conclusion, we look forward to working with the city to increase the stock of affordable housing. And if the board has any questions or thoughts on where there might be additional opportunities for HCR in relation to this plan, we'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Joe. Thoughts or questions on Joe's report? Tom?
I have Phil, may I get a copy of the 161 page?
So, the whole
May I
report?
get a copy of the book?
Yes, I have it right here for you.
Thank you. I'll take it with me. Thank you so much.
Tom?
Given the NYCHA reference, I can't resist not being someone who tends to rely on the press for an accurate portrayal of what's going on. Nonetheless, you can't help but notice the steady drumbeat of attention, right, around NYCHA's management issues, the maintenance issues, et cetera. Any commentary in the report or as part of the presentation on how to do better, at least with respect to the presentation of the issues?
Well, at the press conference, the mayor had the NYCHA chairperson, Shola, at the event, and he stated that she was going to take the year to build relationships with residents and local communities. And I think that we're going to see something because there's no choice, really. I think NYCHA needs funds, and I think this is a way to get them. And
But it's more than funds, though, right? Because I thought I heard something recently that they still have a multi-year backlog on the maintenance orders, the fix and
they've
repair.
improved quite a bit, but it's
I mean,
still there.
reputationally, it seems like a real issue,
they're
right?
taking
And I don't know
steps.
how you balance that. You know, on the one side, you got a 5-borough 10-year plan, and on the other hand, you got press covering absolute disasters on an almost daily basis.
Well, I think the plan takes a look forward, but the mayor has put some early attention onto NYCHA, first and foremost waiving the responsibility that they have to the NYPD of, I believe, $52 million.
Yes.
So that they
Exactly.
can put that focus back into operations and other things. So certainly I think they're accepting that they're not starting at ground zero, that they're in a negative range, but the plan shows that there'll be a lot of focus, not only to bring it up, but to bring it beyond, and so not a lot of look back, but certainly attention given to the unleashing potential that may be on NYCHA campuses.
I just wanted to say, Shola Olatiye recently left Enterprise. She ran our New York office and reported into me, and there is not a more committed, driven person. If there's any way that she can get this done, I have confidence that she's going to do that. And I also think by shining a light on this, she's not going to be working alone. You know, she's got the mayor's ear, and it'll take everybody to, you know, that's a big machine. It's the largest landlord in the country, you know, just to be able to really pull that through. But I'm actually encouraged by the fact that they're not shying away from it. You know, they're if you don't accept that there's an issue, you can address it. So I'm actually very encouraged about that. And I think it's great that we're reviewing this. I'm kind of curious about what the process is going to be for us to be able to engage with the city leadership on an ongoing basis and really work through some of those, you know, collaborative efforts. And if you could speak to that a little bit, it'd be great.
I think it's all in development. I kind of laughed with Marion because that's been a question that Marion's asked as well too. The success of this plan is in working with all the partners, private partners, but most particularly governmental partners. So we, as well as the federal government, will be pressed to make sure that there is success in this plan. Certainly, we're looking to have success through our House New York. So we're trying to see where those synergies are so that we both can meet the deadlines and the expectations.
I think that's great, because I really believe that in this case, that the whole is really greater than the sum of all the parts. So if we can efficiently work together and figure that out and streamline whatever we do, it's going to be a net win for all the residents.
And we'll come back to further conversations with this. Joe wanted to do the overview. We're getting in the weeds on it, and certainly can make our analysis available to the board, and possibly have some conversations when we have our offsite.
I'm really interested in how we're going to engage with the city leadership. You know, what's the process that we're setting into place to have that sort of ongoing working relationship, and it's not just, you know, touching base with Vicky Bean, with Sholo, with Alicia, whoever, you know, is leading the effort.
I mean, I would just say that the plan calls for a city-state task force. I mean, I agree that we need sort of regular leadership level, but obviously we have a lot to bring to that conversation. I don't know whether we've had any contact with the city on that, but it seems like we're a natural player in that conversation if they do convene that task force.
I agree. It sort of laid out, though, that it was elected officials. Mm-hmm. So we have good relations working, especially on federal issues. Marion and the commissioner and I have worked for years now, going down to Washington. She's had a great success with bond recycling. There's other ideas that we love that are not really doable at the moment, I think, given the climate in Washington. We're working on GSE reform, which everyone is interested in, and where that's going. So I'm hopeful that, you know,
yeah, and I'd say in a way we're off to a good start with them. We've enjoyed good relationships with the folks in the housing positions of the city for as long as I've been here. We've always really strove to have a very collegial, you know, don't step on my toes, you know, collaborative relationship. I'd say here, you know, I agree with you. We really need to engage in the substance of where we're going to help each other achieve our shared goals.
Yeah, I know we certainly reached out to the city previous to the plan. There wasn't, I wouldn't say, a lot of interaction at this point. I think there's probably going to be a lot more going forward, and so it's something we can obviously be very helpful to the city. They certainly need bond cap, you know, a whole bunch of things with us to work together, so we have to be, you know, together on these things.
I think they need and want, Bill. I mean,
Yeah,
I really do
there's
think
no
they
doubt.
want that. And I'll just say, you know, many of us have relationships there too, know them very well, and if we as board members can be helpful to the process, I think I speak for myself and the other board members, you know, please bring us in if we can help facilitate in any way.
Yeah, because I get the sense the plan is still evolving, because I mean, I haven't read the 117 pages yet, but it seemed like the commentary from the press, which may have Tom's not always accurate focus. It seemed like they said there wasn't much detail in a 117-page plan, which I don't completely understand.
That's correct. There are a lot, it's very aspirational, with not as much detail as you might, but I think you're right, and it's because it's going to be evolving.
And I probably should say that regardless of whether the relationship is formal or informal, we're going to start building the relationship. I've asked both HPP and HDC to join us at our June meetings. And both Vicki and Gary have agreed. So we'll have some opportunities to at least begin a process.
Terrific.
Good. All right. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Joe.
Joe, 2 copies.
Anyone else?
Fast.
Yeah, I'll take a
I got
copy.
it. A copy.
Let's see how good you are, 2.
Okay, let's keep moving
Thanks,
on the
Joe. Good job.
agenda. Jason will now report on the committee actions.
Yes, the Mortgage Insurance Committee met and took the following actions earlier today. The committee adopted the minutes of the April 10, 2014 meeting, recommended approval for 100% mortgage insurance for Campbell Gardens, Kings County, approved 100% mortgage insurance for the Cove on the Concourse, Bronx County, approved 100% mortgage insurance for PS 186 Boys and Girls Club of Harlem Apartments, New York County, approved 100% mortgage insurance for 1490 Crotona Park East, Bronx County, approved 100% mortgage insurance for 260 to 264 West 153rd Street, New York County, approved 100% mortgage insurance for Brook Avenue Apartments, Bronx County, and approved 100% mortgage insurance for 209 South 2nd Street, Kings County.
We will now present items shared by HFA, AHC, and SONYMA, and Jason will record the approval of the minutes.
The minutes of the meetings of HFA, AHC, and SONYMA held on April 10, 2014 shall be deemed approved, absent corrections from members and directors.
Okay. We now move to the SONYMA action items.
Yes, and may I have a motion and a second to go into executive session pursuant to section 105F of the Open Meetings Law to discuss the financial history of a particular corporation.
So moved.
Second.
We are now going into executive session. Sure. All right, may I have a motion and a second to conclude the executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the executive session is concluded and we are back in public session, and I will note that no votes were taken during the executive session.
Our next item on our agenda is resolution authorizing the release of $32.418 million from the project pool insurance account to the Housing Trust Fund no later than June 30th, 2014. I don't know if we have or need any discussion on that. Yes, so why don't we just go straight to a vote?
Sure. Now before the board for approval is a resolution of the State of New York Mortgage Agency authorizing the transfer of excess reserves from the project pool insurance account of the Mortgage Insurance Fund. Assuming the first and second previously entered for SONYMA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted.
Our next item is item 3, resolution approving 100% mortgage insurance on a $17.12 million HFA permanent first mortgage loan for Campbell Gardens, Phase 2, 560 Winthrop Street in Kings County. This item was discussed and voted on earlier at today's Mortgage Insurance Committee meeting. It is now up for a vote by the SONYMA board. There's no discussion unless the director so requests. Hearing none, we will now move on to the vote.
Now before the board for approval is a resolution of the State of New York Mortgage Agency approving mortgage insurance and a commitment for the provision thereof for Campbell Gardens Phase 2, 560 Winthrop Street, Brooklyn, Kings County. Assuming the first and second previously entered for SONYMA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Jason, I need to record a recusal on my vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Did you get the? Oh, yep, okay, everybody in. No further items for SONYMA. I'm going to ask for a motion, a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Good.
Assuming the first and second previously entered for SONYMA,
Love you all. Thank you.
all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the SONYMA meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bill, budget March. Be more efficient. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Margie.
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Good luck. Thank you. Go get them.
March?
Bill, before leaving, I would just like to add that I want to compliment Marion on the implementation of the new 80/20s. I looked at those proposals and they really are smashing. To see it go into action is wonderful.
Great. Thank you, March. Stay dry. We now move to the HFA action items. At this point, I call to order the 34th Finance and Program Committee meeting of HFA, which will be held jointly with the board meeting. Can I have a motion to open the committee meeting?
So moved.
Second. We'll use these recorded votes as we move forward. Jason?
The minutes of the 33rd meeting of the HFA Finance and Program Committee held on April 10, 2014 shall be deemed approved absent corrections from the members.
The next item is item number 4, resolutions authorizing financing approval in an amount not to exceed $539 million for 605 West 42nd Street apartments located in Manhattan, in New York County. Mary, could you give us a little more background?
I will, and Leonard's going to join me for some specifics on the projects, but I didn't pay Marge to say that, but it was a great segue into talking about our first two 80/20s that are being financed under the new structure. Just to remind everybody, what we had done previously, I'm going to call it, was fully fund 80/20s, but fully funding didn't mean that we provided tax-exempt bonds for 100% of the development cost. Generally, we were providing financing for about 65% of the development cost, and that's because of the bank's equity requirements. These projects generally have a 35–40% equity requirement, much larger than what we see in our typical affordable transactions. The change that we're making is to move from that 65% being financed with tax-exempt bonds to move to only financing the low-income units in the project, which is typically going to be 20%. When we finance the 20% of bonds only, of low-income units only, we're going to do that with a mix of new volume cap and recycled proceeds. But what you're going to see in your board book is going to say tax-exempt bonds. We're always going to provide enough new volume cap to meet what's called the 50% test, which will generate the tax credits that come as of right with bonds. So if you take a low-income unit and let's say that it costs $100 to fund that part of the project, we'll have to provide at least $50 of that with new volume cap in order to generate the tax credits. It's our intention then to come in and maximize recycling to the extent that we have access to recycling to fill up the remainder of that project. But what you'll see in the board book will always say tax-exempt financing, and we're going to be silent about what's new cap and what's recycling, because recycling's new cap we can count on. Recycling is a bit of a unpredictable resource. It's going to be there or not be there based on how other projects are paying off. Remember, we use a bit of our recycling dollars and HDC recycling dollars to do that.
But would it be possible to tell us what the new cap is, or how much of the cap is being?
I can give you an estimate, but I wouldn't want to commit to anything more than a minimum of this amount of new cap, right? Because we're always going to want to hit the 50% test. And the other thing that we're fine.
That's fine. I think just for our purpose, or in order to meet our responsibility, it would help if we had some ballpark idea, at least,
Sure.
of where we were.
not a problem.
And the 50% test is 50% of 20%
Exactly,
or 10%, roughly.
exactly, roughly, of total development.
Or
cost.
tax-exempt bonds, whether
Of
that's.
new
Of
taxes.
new volume tax.
Yes.
Right, because the recycle bonds don't come with.
Credits.
Credits.
Exactly.
So well, I don't want to get ahead of you. Finish.
Okay, so I want to just talk about some big picture things. The other thing that you'll notice in the memo is that the descriptions of the projects are more complex than they used to be. And you'll see we have lots of condo sections of the project. And again, that's to try to isolate the part that we're going to finance with tax-exempt bonds. The other thing that you should expect to see is sort of a range of different executions in terms of the nature of the financing that the agency is providing. Let me be clear about that. So on the low-income units, we're going to issue tax-exempt bonds. Those can be done either on a publicly offered basis, which is the expectation of the two projects we're reviewing today. They both have letters of credits from different banks. We're going to offer them to the market on a floating rate basis. We also expect to see the tax-exempt bonds being purchased directly by banks according to our private placement program. And then on the market rate side, the part that we're not giving tax-exempt bonds to, I also expect we're going to see a range of executions. Either taxable bonds, again, probably with the letter of credit, also going out to money market funds and other short-term investors. We expect also to see those bonds perhaps being purchased directly. You know, if somebody's going to directly purchase the tax-exempt piece, they're more than likely going to also directly purchase the taxable piece. And then the other execution we expect to see is the market rate piece being financed through a conventional loan. And that's the case on the Navy Pier deal that's in today's board book. So there's going to be a range of different financing. There's going to be a range of different condo structures. So it's definitely been a bit more complex than how we used to do things. I think, you know, the guidance has gone out to the industry. I haven't heard too much squawking about where we're going. Everybody's trying to get their head around the issues. One of the things that has come up is on leasehold land, and leasehold condos have a little bit of hair around them given the condo laws in the state. So we're working with the AG's office through those so that we can make sure that those projects also can be financed, and I think we're well on our way to putting this into place. Any big questions before I have Leonard dive in? The benefit, of course, is that we've moved from, you know, call it 65% financing to 20% financing with tax-exempt bonds, and the difference, that 45% difference, is going to go to finance more affordable housing throughout the state, and perhaps also because we had been seeing this, you know, big pipeline of 80/20s, you know, get more projects moving forward without straining the state's cap resources.
But just to be clear, it's 65 to 20, but of that 20, only 10 needs to be new.
Right, and of the 65, it used to be that about 50 needed to be new. Right, so we're moving from 50 to 10 of new cap.
No, it's great.
If there is that much recycling to make the difference.
It's a huge move forward, and I'm happy to hear that the community is accepting it and working with us and moving forward. So that's good to hear.
And if there's not that much new cap to move forward, could you make up the difference with taxable bonds? Because you really only need 10% tax exempt to make it work.
I suppose so. You mean of recycling?
Of recycling. So
Yes,
if
I
you
mean,
didn't have recycling, could you substitute taxable before you went to burn more volume cap?
you could. I mean, what we tried to do, because we were definitely increasing the borrowing costs of these projects, was to try to balance, you know, what we were taking away in terms of what we were given. So There was the hope that we could fully fund the low-income units with tax-exempt bonds, but yes, in a pinch, we could get there. The other thing that we did, in a typical 80-20, their income requirements for the low-income tenants is at 50% of AMI. And in a 100% affordable building, which is now what we're financing with tax-exempt bonds, the income limit is 60% of AMI. So we're also allowing people to use the standard affordable housing income limit in their project.
Yeah, ma'am, why is there a difference in the, between the 50% and the 60%? Why is it lower in one and higher in the other?
We're following the IRS code for tax-exempt bonds. So tax-exempt bonds require, in order to qualify for tax-exempt bonds, if you're 100% affordable, the units need to be below 60% of AMI. But if you want to use tax-exempt bonds for a mixed income project, at least 20% of the units have to be at 50% or below.
Right, but the maximum is 60, the maximum income is 60%, right? So we could decide to make it lower if we wanted to.
You could, what we tried to do when we were coming up with the guidance on these projects was to balance what we were taking off the table with what we were allowing. And since we're providing financing for 100% affordable building, the tax-exempt bonds are going to be focused on that.
So, I'm sorry, can you just,
Sure.
sort of, there's a step I'm missing. So
Okay.
as we now think of the project, you're thinking of this as a kind of separate project that is 100% affordable.
In order to provide tax-exempt bonds to the section only, that is what it is. It's 100% affordable.
So we don't evaluate the project as a whole, even though we're still
We
financing
think about it
taxable.
as a whole, but our tax-exempt resource is targeted to the low-income units.
Okay. Okay, I mean, so this gets to a larger question as we are, the sort of information we get, and I know Stephen had some questions about this as well in terms of, this has 3 different residential, I mean, the first one we're looking at is 3 different residential condos, 2 parking condos, 7 commercial condos.
Exactly.
So when we do total development costs and we're looking at that picture, right, are we only, and we're also financing the taxable side, right? So we're involved in the, it's almost 70% of the project as a whole that is going to be debt financed, right? So when we think about things like total development costs and our ratios for developer equity and all of that, we're looking at the project as a whole, right?
Exactly.
But when we're looking at the affordable piece and thinking about what levels of affordability we can drive in these kinds of projects, we're then looking at that as just a separate project.
I'm not sure, it feels like there's a question under your question.
Yeah.
So, because I would say yes to everything you
Right.
say. Yes.
No, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, we
Yeah.
think about the whole project.
Yeah.
The whole project is subject to a regulatory agreement.
Right.
We will provide financing in a number of different ways for the whole project. But in order to just provide tax-exempt bonds to the low-income unit, it does need to be it needs to be separate in order for us to provide resources.
But from a policy standpoint, is it worth having a conversation about whether we think about, even though it is 100% affordable, and that's what we would do on any other 100% affordable deal, does it make sense to think about the context of this all-affordable deal in that we would otherwise, as a mixed income project, have required 50 or 40, and use that as the benchmark for these deals, just because it would be the same as what it would otherwise be. I don't know. It seems like that's what you're...
Yeah, I still don't quite understand why we make that distinction. Why we're using 60 here and 40 in the mixed income. We could use 50 here. And how much of a difference would that make in eligibility, and the pool of possible tenants? I don't know, but is it worth having that discussion, perhaps?
I think in the general thinking and conversations we've had broadly about this, the idea was we're increasing your cost of borrowing by taking resources off the table for 45% of your debt structure. And one of the ways of balancing then increased borrowing costs was to allow on these 20% units to go from 50% to 60%.
I think it might be helpful then if we could actually see the numbers and see the relations, to get a better understanding of the relationship and how it works and what's possible.
Okay. Do you want to do that in a board meeting setting? Do you want to save it for the
Or just
July
do it-
Why don't we work
education?
with July?
The
We
other-
can do some theoretics.
We'll do some stuff in July, yeah, because we have a
Okay.
little opportunity to go into it some depth.
Okay.
So, and that kind of leads me to another question that I had about just the overall thinking behind this,
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, I think right now it works because the rates on taxable bonds seem to be pretty low.
Right.
And if we're making up for, effectively making up for additional costs by.
Exactly.
If we're doing that now, what's gonna happen when rates go up? I mean, is it?
Well, we don't have really any room to go on the affordable.
Like
That's
16 is
what,
the top.
that's the maximum. I
Right,
mean,
but
I
what-
do think about, what's the future for these sorts of projects, and what happened.
Yeah, so
I have no
costs
idea.
will go up.
Right, but I guess as a,
Financing.
right, I mean, as an overall comment, I mean, I think what we've come up with works now, but,
Mm-hmm.
we may, as a board, need to revisit this if rates go up, because it may just go completely upside down in terms of the.
Right, or if other things change. I mean, we've, in the 7 years I've been here, have evolved in different ways our financing mechanisms for 80/20s in reaction to the demand by 80/20 projects, and the supply of caps. So I think of this as part of a continuum, not necessarily, this is it for forever forward. It may be, or the world may change again, and
Yeah, that's a great
We'll
point. 'cause
find
We've been flexible,
have to
we've been
adjust.
market sensitive, and we have moved in this direction in terms of supply and demand and stretching our resources. And at some point, when the world changes, which it will, it's only a question of when.
we may have to revisit.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
Marion, would I be correct in stating that one net result of this is that we're now creating more leverage for our tax-exempt resources?
Yeah, because it's stretching, it has the
Right.
possibility to stretch.
So
to-
if that's true, then presumably we're gonna be looking to do more.
I would
right,
hope so.
and-
More shovels in the ground, more
Right.
jobs created.
But that also means we may be bumping up against supply here, right, in terms of deals that people are bringing us, or how do we think about the ability to actually use that additional leverage now?
I think a couple of ways. I mean, the whole conversation around, look at that pipeline of projects was really about the demand side, because it did look like there was quite a pipeline of projects that were developing to get in the ground in the next 18 months. If you think about 421A, that does make some sense. And also I think the cycle of people catching up after the Great Recession. So I think there are 80/20 projects that are lined up to use it. I also think that we've never had a constraint of cap on our affordable deals. The city sometimes has, and this does give the state the ability to help the city reach more projects.
It could be an issue if there is any kind of a mandatory inclusionary, it's going to be a bigger pipeline. I mean, it's going to apply to a larger number of projects coming through the city. So I think it's great to think about how we stretch the resource. So.
All right, 6:05.
Good morning.
Morning.
This development is located at 605 West 42nd Street in the city of New York, New York County. And the development involves the acquisition and construction of 1,174 units of rental housing in the Times Square, Clinton area of Manhattan. Development will consist of new construction of a 61-story tower with approximately 1.13 million square feet. Of the 1,174 units, 20% or approximately 235 units will be affordable to households with incomes at or below 60% AMI. Development will also include 73,000 square feet of retail space. Development will have 541 studios, 493 one-bedrooms, 158 two-bedrooms, and 1 3-bedroom unit. 1 2-bedroom will be set aside as a non-revenue employee unit. Amenities include for the residents a fitness center, rooftop deck, community rooms, additional and additional resident amenities. Parking, bicycle storage will be available at additional charge, and the lobby will be staffed 24 hours a day. Development is located several blocks west of Times Square, providing easy access to numerous subway lines, bus lines, etc. In addition, later this year, the extension of the 7 line will open, affording residents a new transit option just several blocks to the south. Development will be built with union labor. They have a project labor agreement in place and will incorporate various different green elements. Total development cost of the projects is approximately $820 million. The HFA bonds during construction will be a maximum of $539 million, $163.8 of tax-exempt, and $375.2 million of taxable bonds, which will stay the same during the permanent. It's anticipated to stay the same during the permanent phase. Federal tax credit equity proceeds will be approximately $25.23 million, and the developer equity will be approximately $255 million, of which a portion will be from a mezzanine loan to the borrower issued by SL Green Realty Corporation. A letter of credit is to be provided by Bank of China with up to $539 million, with the participation from ULICO, Union Labor Life Insurance Company, of about $100 million. Tax credits will not be syndicated by the borrower at this time, and the ownership of the borrower plans to create 12 condominium units under a declaration of condominium. The owner of all of the units constituting the residential, parking, and retail space shall be controlled by the Moynihan Group. The Moynihan Group owns and manages over 20 million square feet of property nationwide in all sectors of real estate, including office, hotel, retail, condominium, and rental apartments. Moynihan maintains a substantial real estate development, ownership, and management presence in Manhattan. And the agency in the past has provided $135 million in financing for Moynihan's 464-unit building known as the Biltmore, and provided $151 million for financing for Moynihan's 393-unit known as the Mark. Construction manager is Tishman Construction, the architects Goldstein Hill and West, and the property manager will be the Moynihan Group. If you have any questions, the whole project.
Big one.
Very big. 1 3-bedroom apartment.
I'm sure it's on the market already.
All right. Questions, comments? No?
All right. And, okay, also, just in terms of formalities, Bill and Daryl, can I get your motion and a second for the financing program? Just to make sure we have everybody properly recorded.
Yes.
Second.
Great. All right. Now before the committee and board are resolutions to be adopted that were transmitted in connection with this item. Assuming the first and second previously entered for the Finance and Program Committee, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted. Assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted.
All right, our next item, item number 5, is a resolution authorizing financing approval in an amount not to exceed $33 million for Navy Pier Apartments located at 7 and 8 Navy Pier Court in Richmond County, Staten Island.
Our first 80/20 in Staten Island.
Yeah.
So I'm a big picture worth 1,000 words kind of person, so I'm going to pass this out, but I want to give the board a sense of the city's vision and the borough of Staten Island's vision for that area between the Verrazano Bridge and the ferry terminal, where the borough really wants to see a concentration of development happen. So I'm going to pass out this map which shows you the waterfront. Number 1 is the ferry terminal, and number 14 is our site, and you can get a sense of all the other activities that are happening there. Sorry, Elaine, that I don't have this to send to you.
Aaron, is that where the Ferris wheel is going?
The Ferris wheel is in between.
Okay.
What's happening. So there is a lot going on here. So big picture, this was a site that was expected to be a naval base. And over time, it transferred from the naval base to the city's Economic Development Corporation. EDC put out an RFP and selected Iron State to be their designated developer for this particular site. As part of the site improvements, which I'm also going to pass out, the city is investing over $30 million to build an esplanade that will connect the site we're financing to the waterfront. That esplanade is due to start a little later this year and is expected to be finished up pretty much in line with the completion of construction on the site we're before the board with today. The site is 1 block away from, I'm going to call it a subway, but it's an above-ground train that runs in Staten Island, and will take people to the ferry in under 5 minutes. It's two stops to get to the ferry. This project that we're before the board with is the first phase of development expected on the site. It includes 571 units, 115 of which are affordable and consists of zeros, ones, and twos, commercial space, and parking. And the commercial space, more pictures. 2 of the big commercial spaces are already leased to restaurants. And the hope is to create sort of a vibrant waterfront activity center, including these residences. This is a sense of what's going to be happening. Sorry. So on the ground floor will be a mix of retail, restaurant type space, and other sort of more community focused local grocery store uses, etc. The project in total has consists of approximately $160 million of total development costs. The agency is providing $100 million of that in financing, up to $30 million in tax-exempt bonds. The rest will be originated as a conventional loan. And the equity requirement in this project consists of borrower equity and also EB5 equity. We had an EB5 project before the board once before. EB5 is a federally regulated program that provides citizenship to foreigners in exchange for their investment in a project. EB5 is generally structured as a 5-year loan. At the end of that 5 years, there's an expectation that that loan will be repaid, and if not, it will be extended. The EB5 in this transaction is structured as preferred equity. The bonds that we're going to sell are going to be enhanced by PNC and sold on a floating rate basis to the market. The developer, if I haven't mentioned it already, and I think I didn't, is Iron State Holdings. They're a New Jersey-based organization. They have spent a lot of time perfecting what they call their new urban model to move into areas like this that are maybe on the fringe of where development has happened. And they've had great success in doing that in various parts of New Jersey, in Jersey City, in Harrison, and elsewhere. I do have not a personal relationship with them, but personal knowledge of their developments, even though this is a first for the agency. I have family on the Jersey Shore, and I've been to the development in Long Branch, and would definitely give it a thumbs up. The project consists of a number of green elements that are outlined on page 4 of the board memo, including roof vegetation, low consumption plumbing fixtures, light sensors, low emitting materials, and lots of other stuff that's beyond my understanding, but all in the hopes of meeting LEED and NYSERDA performance guidelines. And the development also, being on the waterfront in Staten Island, has had some redesign to mitigate against future Sandy-like storms. And also that's included on the top of page 5 in the memo. So the lowest residential floor is elevated 3 feet above the flood-proof design elevation. The building systems have been elevated to the extent they can be, and otherwise they're contained in watertight design components of the project. The buildings will only use flood damage resistant materials below the floodplain elevation, and also include generators to provide emergency electricity should there be a power outage. The owner for this is Homeport, which will be controlled by Iron State, which is controlled by the Barry family, which owns or manages over 10 million square feet of property nationally. Applied will be the managing entity. They manage over 5,000 units of low-income market rate rental. AJD will be the construction, the general contractor.
Great. Questions, comments? It's nice to see something in Staten Island. That's terrific. Okay, no, just go to vote.
Now before the committee and the board are resolutions to be adopted that were transmitted in connection with this item. Assuming the first and second previously entered for the Finance and Program Committee, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted. Assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted.
Item number 6, resolution authorizing financing approval in amount not to exceed $10.89 million for Cove on the Concourse located at 1020 Carroll Place in the Bronx. Discussed this earlier today too.
Thank you.
Okay.
GMRT projects.
Yeah, the big picture over here, the overview here is that these next two items are MRT projects. The HDFC board in March, I think, approved the MRT allocations for these projects. We're particularly excited about them. And I'll start with the Cove on the Concourse. The Cove on the Concourse is a very unique project when we talk about trying to develop a range of housing choices in a place like the Bronx. I think this project somehow has managed to do so in 50 units, right? It's a complex project, but it meets a lot of different needs and a lot of priorities for the agency. It's anticipating the new construction of a 12-story building with 50 units. It's located on Carroll Place in the Bronx. The total investment will be $20.5 million. It's a mixed income, mixed use, and a portion of mixed-use project, and a portion of the units will be for MRT, New York 3 eligible tenants. 15 of the units are the MRT units that are be set aside for single adults diagnosed as mentally ill. 13 will be set aside. 13 units will be set aside for households with incomes up to 90%. So that's where the mixed income component is comes in. The remaining 21 income generating units will be set aside for tenants up to 60% of the area median income. As I mentioned, this project was previously awarded MRT funds from HDFC in March in the amount of $1.9 million. Today we are seeking approval for $10.9 million of tax-exempt bonds for construction and $3.5 million permanent mortgage loan, $1.5 million in subsidy loan, and $514,000 allocation of tax credits. With the complex project, it's coming with a number of funding sources. We talked about partnerships with New York City earlier, and this is an example of how we already work with them. In addition to $3 million of New York City Department of Housing and Preservation LIP loan, there's also a $1 million Bronx Borough President Reso 8 fund allocation to the project. The project is also seeking state low-income housing tax credits that will be allocated to the project under the RFP that we issued earlier this fiscal year. OMH has provided funding for the on-site services, which is one of the required components of an MRT project. It has to come with a service component and service funding. Capital One will be providing the letter of credit, and SONYMA, as you know, will be doing the insurance. So let's talk a little bit about the project itself. As I mentioned, it's mixed use. A component of the project, as a result of the sale, will be created to develop a space for a church. And really the sale price is what's going to be used to help develop the project, makes it a, develop the church portion of the project, makes it a complex transaction, but it's kind of one of those ways we're achieving the mixed use nature of the project. The kind of final thing I wanted to highlight in terms of, like I said, hitting on a lot of the agency priorities is about the sponsor. We've had some discussions, done some surveys about trying to increase MBE participation in as developers. And I think this project, provides a model of a partnership between an established MBE contractor or developer, ERP, with an emerging MBE developer, or both companies. So that's another kind of unique aspect and maybe a model of things to come as we pursue that issue. The managing agent will be BRP, which is that same sponsor. The services which are required under the MRT program are going to be provided by the Association for Rehabilitative Case Management and Housing. They're a nonprofit, well-established for more than 40 years in New York City. They currently serve about 530 people. So that's the description of a very complex project, but we're really thrilled about its potential impact in the neighborhood, and just as an example of the kind of hard project to do, but one worthwhile.
Yeah, sure. Thoughts, comments? The project. Albany, little
Now before the committee and board are resolutions to be adopted that were transmitted in connection with this item. Assuming the first and second previously entered for the Finance and Program Committee, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is carried and the resolution adopted. Assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution is adopted.
Item number 7 is a resolution authorizing financing approval in amount not to exceed $52.745 million for Campbell Gardens, Phase 2, 560 Winthrop Street in Brooklyn. Also talked about this morning.
Yes, it was mortgage insurance.
Right, exactly. Another mortgage insurance fund deal and another MRT deal. It was previously awarded $4.2 million in MRT funds by the HDFC board. I think that was in March as well. This is the Campbell Gardens Apartments located in Brooklyn. And again, in terms of agency priorities, the MRT program is obviously important in ensuring that we have these types of projects located in a variety of boroughs. I think this provides another example of that. The total development cost is $96 million. It's a new construction of a 9-story building with 293 units located on Winthrop Street in Brooklyn, New York. It's located on a vacant property formerly used by the Kings County Hospital. Of the 292 revenue-generating units, all will be affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income. And again, it's a complex mix of tenancies. 158 of the studio units are set aside for the chronically homeless single adults diagnosed with mental illness. 24 units are set aside for homeless families exiting the shelter system. And 110 units are set aside for households earning under 80 or 60% of the AMI. We are asking for $7 million in tax-exempt construction mortgage loan and $17.3 million permanent loan, and an allocation of $3.5 million of low-income housing tax credits. Again, it's a complex project with a number of resources and resources that match state and city resources. There is a $1 million Brooklyn Borough President loan and a $1 million City Council loan, $6 million New York State Homeless Housing Assistance Program loan, and a $20.5 million New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development Supportive Housing Loan Program. OMH, again, is providing funding to provide the support services on the site, as well as New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So again, it's a complex mix of resources for the construction, but also the operations and support services. The sponsor is Campbell, which is the Church Avenue Merchants Block Association. It's a nonprofit association formed in 1977, and they provide services to approximately 35,000 individuals and families. Campbell also operates 1,800 units of emergency, transitional, and permanent housing. The managing agent will be Wynn Residential, who we're familiar with the number of projects that the agency has financed in the past.
So just a quick question on the financing structure. It's 52.7 in construction period bonds,
Yes.
and then that gets, there's going to be a redemption upon completion down to 17.2. Is that
Exactly. If you look at the sources and uses attached, the permanent mortgage amount will be 17.2 million, and the take out of that is a substantial amount of the tax equity. So during construction, the low income tax credit equity is only 1.7, but it comes in to pay off the bond amount in about 30.
And then we would recycle those bonds.
recycled?
Exactly.
How do we think about the project, the ongoing maintenance and project management side of this? You know, 2/3 of the units here are going to go to special needs individuals who I would have thought are going to require, just given the nature of the issues, pretty substantial support while they're there. How do we think about how much space is devoted to servicing those folks? And historically, do we have any performance data, for lack of a better term, in terms of how we've done or how the state has done on these kinds of projects? I know the MRT funding is relatively new, but
this model is not new. This sort of mixed tenancy model has been there. So I want to try to break apart your question.
But in this case, it's 2/3, so it feels like a very biased mix almost, you know what I mean, in terms of the services that are going to have to be delivered. I mean, if you're talking about a combination of mental illness and chemical dependencies, that's a pretty...
There's typically space that's set aside in the ground floor.
Exactly. There's on-site supportive services that are paid for by OMH in this case.
Is that similar to almost like a mini clinic, or how do you, or?
I've seen it done in different ways. I'm sorry, I don't know specifically how this building is designed, but there's usually, I have seen office space or community space where people can meet with their case managers. There's usually somebody at the front desk also keeping track of people's comings and goings, making sure, you know, that people are doing well on site. And
it just feels like this is a highly specialized project, right? Given the nature of the folks who are going to be living there and the services that they require. I was just curious how we do.
Yeah, I mean, part of your question hits on a lot of discussion that's had in the industry, right? So for a very long time, different models have been worked to try to provide the services and the housing for people with needing special services, mental illness, substance abuse, things like that. And for a very long time, I think those were projects where that was the only population served, and I think that's proved not always to be a disaster, but not to be consistent with how we want to accomplish community development. And as you can imagine, citing a project that only has this population can be difficult, even citing a project where there's a substantial portion. So this is an example of integrated housing. I think reasonable people will disagree on what the right mix is, but what's important is that you have capable organizations providing the management and capable organizations providing the services. I think in both these cases we do. There are good examples where a substantial portion of supportive units coexist with affordable housing units very successfully. Only because of my prior experience, I know of some examples in Rochester, with DePaul. They provided a number of projects that were, approximately 2/3 or a vast majority, but affordable housing was well managed and wasn't really impacted. The other thing that I like to note is when we're providing supportive housing of this sort, it's actually making, I think, if we do it right and the management is right, it's participating in community development, right? You know, the people that need this housing exist in our communities, and they're safer and the community is better off if they have the supportive services they need.
I think it's also worth mentioning that this is the second phase.
Right,
That there
exactly.
is already a unit that is up and running, and to signal the success, look at the contributions made by the borough president as well as the local council. And it shows that it is a model that's working.
And that's very important, to get that type of support for a project, frankly, that in many communities can be difficult to cite. I think that's a vote of confidence.
I think it's terrific we're doing it. It just struck me as though this is specialized space, right? You really need skill sets that are different from what we would normally think about.
Sure.
Was phase one a similar model?
I don't remember the particulars, it was, but
Yes,
I don't remember
yes.
the particulars in terms of the percentage. Do you, David?
I don't know the breakout, but.
Right.
But it was mixed.
Yes, definitely. But to.
Do you guys know David Simmons?
Come on up, Dave.
Come on.
Morning, guys.
He's like,
Roll the seat up.
Carol's is speaking up.
To further answer your question, with respect to our projects that are mixed income, we work with the Office of Mental Health. They specialize in social services. They vet all the vendors, or I should say social service providers that are joint with the developer with these projects. So the social service provider has to provide a budget. They go over the budget with respect to the workers, all the staff members that are involved with the social services. Everything is vetted, and they do monitor them. So we as housing people look to them more on the social service side because that's their specialty. And we want to make sure that the social service provider and the borrower and the management agent all work together accordingly to make sure the project works well.
And they have a very,
Yeah.
very explicit contract with the service provider. If there were issues, they do have the power to intercede and enforce a change of service provider. I'm not anticipating that in this case, but just to let you know, this isn't, you know, setting them off and you hope for the best. There's real monitoring of that services contract.
And the only thing that I was going to add was, you know, through our experience of financing more and more of these mixed tenancy projects, we've developed a very strong working relationship with OMH, with HHAP, even with the Department of Health through the MRT Subcommittee on Housing, and with HPD's Supportive Housing Group. So it's lots of agencies coming together to make something go from concept to reality. It's complicated, and kudos to David and Richard Brown, who mostly focus their efforts on our projects.
Many of these projects take a long time to
Yes.
come to fruition.
I would have thought
I have a question which gets away from social services issue to get into another area, which is sort of an overall question. In the projects that are 100% affordable, do we track and do we have any policy regarding the size of the units that are expected? It seems that there's a large number of studios and one-bedroom units as opposed to larger family units. And given the demographic distribution of family size, given the distribution of family size and the demographics of the homeless population or the low-income population, I'm just wondering if we should have guidelines regarding unit size and the proportion of units or some range of units that should be larger rather than smaller.
But in this case, if I read this right,
In this
half
yeah,
the
in
half
this
the
one it's
units
worse,
are
but I'm
focused
saying-
on single adults, right? So
With the
I thought that kinda lines
special
up,
needs
right?
projects,
Yep, there's a policy decision there about whether you want to give preference to single adults or
Versus
if you want
families,
to
you
have
mean.
families. And I'm just asking if that has been, if that policy decision is a conscious decision in some way, or if it's been taken into consideration in some way.
But presumably OMH would have a view on this too, right, in terms of the population's biases.
So I think with respect, the affordable units are a little bit different than the special needs units. Let's separate them. With respect to the special needs projects and the smaller apartments, they're usually driven by what funding's available. So this is all under New York 3 population. So there might be a specific category for, let's say, an individual that's homeless, for conversation's sake. So if the borrower is going to OMH for those types of funds, or those funds are available within that program, then chances are the property is going to mirror that. They'll make studios, let's say 18 studios for conversation's sake, to fit those funds that they're going to use, they're going to need for those social service people. The affordable projects are a little bit different. It's more or less about money, when I say money, the revenue that's going to be generated by the units. Sometimes it's not feasible to make a lot of large apartments. Sometimes it is, it just varies. And usually the developer comes to us with the concept and we work from there. If the arrangement of units seem to be adequate, we'll go along with it. If there are issues, we'll
There are certainly a number of agency priorities that hit on this subject. Throughout all of our programs, we always work and have priority, especially with the Unified Funding Application Round, to find family units, especially in low poverty areas, but we also have priorities to provide supportive housing, which tend to be, smaller unit sizes. Getting back to the New York City housing plan, there's actually some discussion of this in the housing plan because the need for units is on the two ends of the spectrum, right? Lots of studios at once, because we have so many smaller households now than we did, decades ago. But then the real need for 3-bedroom units, I think, which is much more about the difficulty in financing larger size units, especially in high cost areas like New York City.
Right, the land is so expensive.
Right.
Yeah, because I was just thinking actually about it in terms of the mayor's plan and his focus on housing the homeless families that are in the shelter system. And presumably those families need larger rather than smaller units. And perhaps we should take that into consideration in some way.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Let's go. Thank you.
All right. Now before the committee and board are resolutions to be adopted that were transmitted in connection with this item. Assuming the first and second previously entered for the Finance and Program Committee, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution adopted. Assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the resolution is adopted.
Okay, now we move to the AHC item. Item number 8 is a resolution authorizing award of grant funds for certain projects. I think there's 23 of them. So, Mr. Nelson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Good morning again. It's been a little while since AHC has been at the table before the board, so we're glad to be back today. As the chairman mentioned, we have 23 projects, and in an effort to ensure you don't forget about the little guy.
Wait, the little guy? Is there height discrimination?
No. I wasn't looking at you in that context. I meant the little guy in AHC, right? Yeah, complex, clearly. So Dominic and I are prepared to read each of the executive summaries to you today to fully brief you on AHC. Just kidding. I did, however, want to, I'm sure you have, I did, however, want to present to the board just a summary for your update and knowledge about where we've come over the last year and what we're looking at in the year ahead. So if you'll indulge us for just a few minutes, we'll give you a couple of bits of background here. In the last reporting period for the agencies ending March 31st of this calendar year, using funds previously appropriated for the AHC program, we approved with your support, awards totaling $11.7 million to renovate 530 units of affordable housing for low and moderate income people across the state. We produced these awards to grantees in 16 counties across the state, including those here in New York City. As you know, grants are typically used to subsidize the purchase price of a new home, co-op, or condominium, or provide funding for needed repairs up to a maximum of $40,000 per household. And grants generally help households with incomes up to 90% of local AMI. The breakdown of funding for that calendar year reporting breaks down with $3.6 million for new construction, $2.6 million for home improvement, and $5.5 million for acquisition and rehab, which is our single biggest by way of dollars, but comes in second place in terms of units. New construction produced 112 units, home improvement 237, and the acquisition rehab program activities produced 181 units. For a total count of 530, I want to just highlight that of the 530, 30% are New York City units and 70% are upstate, so you can see the volume of work we do is largely outside of New York City. However, when you do the cost breakdown, 46% of the funds go to projects in New York City, a little over $5 million. So our dollars clearly go further upstate just due to the cost of work here in the downstate region. So that's a snapshot of the year past. In October of last year, we issued an RFP for state fiscal year 13 appropriations for the AHC program for $25 million. Applications were due back to the agency in January, and the program continues to remain in high demand, as evidenced by the response to this RFP. We received 115 applications for the program, requesting in excess of $64 million in funding that, if we had enough money, would produce a total count of more than 3,000 units across the state. Interestingly enough, when you do the breakdown of requested funds, it breaks down on that same 30-70% ratio between New York City and upstate respectively. So it's interesting how that theme carries through in terms of both need as well as interest in the way of our applicants. This NOFA, I should just point out, had two new items that I wanted to highlight for all of you. Subsequent to recently passed legislation, in previous legislative sessions, AHC funds of up to 100% can now be used for projects for rehabilitation only, not including acquisition costs. It used to require a match for the residents that were receiving assistance or leverage from the grantees, and that's no longer necessary. So we are, for the first time in response to this NOFA and RFP, seeing applications come in at that 100% request allowance. It's also the first RFP and NOFA that allows for AHC funds to be used in part up to a maximum allowable amount of 10% for administrative costs to help offset the cost burden for grantees who are administering the program locally. This is in keeping with many of the other programs within the agency on the local level that provide in a range of 7 to 10% of administrative costs to help grantees. And then thirdly, this is the first cycle in which applicants for AHC are required to go through a new registration process with the state as part of the reforms that the governor's initiated over the last several years. Not-for-profit and soon municipal entities seeking grant funding of any sort from the state have to register with the new Grants Gateway system, which is much like the CFA and some other consolidated efforts to move things through the state. They have centralized the registration process for grants through the state so that you have to register and then be qualified by your lead agency. And a lot of folks out doing work across the state identify HCR as their lead agency. But it's an important process. It helps us make sure that they're fiscally sound, that they're registered with the Charities Registration Bureau, the Attorney General's Office, and other key qualifiers for work with the state. So with that, today we're bringing to the board 23 projects requesting $8.1 million for 508 units. So in this single batch of awards today, we're going to do almost as many units as reported in the last calendar year. So a pretty sizable chunk of activity today. 84% of the dollars requested today, 6.8 million are for home improvement, and that will go towards 473 units of homeowner assistance. A little less than 400,000 will go towards new construction of 11 units, and a little less than 1 million will go towards acquisition and rehabilitation of 24 units. These awards cover more than 20 counties across the state. Outside of New York City, we don't have any awards for the board today that are New York City projects, but we will in the coming months. And last but not least, I just want to highlight that the $8 million in AHC funds before the board today will leverage almost dollar to dollar more than $9 million. So it's a sizable match in the source of, or in the context of state, private, and other federal funds that go against these AHC dollars. So with that, Dominic, do you have anything you want to add from a little back?
Yeah, I'll be short.
Wow.
Actually, I just want to echo Matthew's sentiments. There was a lot of work to be done. We had a delay in the processing period. NOFA from last year. Staff was busy responding to Sandy and out in the disaster recovery centers. We lost a member of our staff to Marion's unit.
Thank you.
We supported our colleagues in the agency.
Yes.
It was a win-win.
It was a win-win. And we've had new requirements. Staff has answered the bell each time. I just like to recognize them. Desiree Cumberbatch, Larry Galata, Deirdre Kemp, and James O'Hare, who's here, and our newest member, Jamal Wilkerson, who's joining us as a project assistant in hopes of becoming a project manager. They've all done a fantastic job, and a manager is only as good as their team, and I got one of the best as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, and thank
Good team players.
Yeah,
Like that.
I have a great team. I'm lucky to have Dominic lead the team here in New York City, so my recognition of him as well. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them.
So just a few. I mean, I know this is a consent item, but this is the first cycle I think I've been through on this, just from my own background. As I understand the mandate of AHC, we're supposed to target as low an income band as possible. And I think you had mentioned 90%, but the summaries say 112% of AMI, and I wonder what process we go through to think about the income level of the homeowners that we are targeting.
Sure. You want to speak to that a little
Well,
bit?
we do. What the executive summary you have before you is a culmination of 25 years of getting to this point. And we allow up to, we have a tiered structure of the AHC. 40,000 is the max, provided you're in a high-cost area and you're at or below 90% of AMI or 112%. 90% of AMI or 112% of the HUD low-income.
Okay.
The background is, what doesn't come to the board are the targets within them.
Right.
So if we put these targets in there, they would be very specific. We wouldn't have the flexibility somewhere down the road. They couldn't hit those targets to adjust. So we are analyzing that. If you want to see that, Matthew mentioned at our most recent credit committee meeting, where there's targets or goals, we're going to add a line under public purpose so that for informational purposes.
Yes, I'm glad you raised it because it was something we did discuss in the last meeting.
Okay.
So we'll see that going forward in the future.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
With the anticipated success of our tour that Jason and his staff are putting together, we'd like for it to become recurring, and hopefully we can go east. We're going north this time. Hopefully we can go east and also include some of the AHC so that we can get a 3D vision of some of the great work that Matthew and Dominic and the staff are doing.
That'd be great. Great work.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good work. Good projects. Let's watch the vote.
Now before the board is a resolution of the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation authorizing awards of grant funds for certain projects located outside of the city of New York. Assuming the first and second previously entered for AHC, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried.
There being no further items for the HFA Finance and Program Committee, I'm going to ask for a motion and second to adjourn the HFA Finance and Program Committee. Being no further items for HFA and AHC boards, I'm going to ask for motions and seconds to adjourn those meetings.
Assuming the first and second previously entered for the HFA Finance and Program Committee, all in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried and the committee meeting is adjourned. Assuming the first and second previously entered for the HFA and AHC boards, all in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the meetings are adjourned. And our next board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 12th, 2014 at 8:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Albany.
See you next week.